For hundreds of years, Japan was a country that kept to itself. It was a land of samurai. Big ships from America and Europe arrived at its shores. They had modern armies and powerful industries. Japan's leaders saw this and felt a sense of urgency. Japan started building factories, railways, and a modern army and navy. They saw how these countries controlled vast territories across the globe, gathering resources and power. This idea of expansion became a powerful force, driving the nation's policies for the next several decades. Japan's first major move towards building an empire was against its neighbors. In 1894, Japan went to war with China. As a result of this war, Japan took control of the island of Taiwan in 1895. The people of Taiwan did not simply accept Japanese rule. They resisted. Next, Japan turned its attention to Korea, strategically located between Japan, China, and Russia. In 1904, the Russo-Japanese War broke out. To the shock of the world, Japan defeated Russia. In 1910, Japan formally annexed the country, making it a colony. For the next 35 years, Korea would endure a harsh period of Japanese rule. After securing Taiwan and Korea, Japan's ambitions grew even larger. Its main target was now China itself. In 1931, they created an excuse to invade. An explosion on a Japanese-controlled railway in Manchuria was blamed on Chinese nationalists. It gave them the pretext they needed to launch a full-scale invasion of Manchuria. The League of Nations condemned the invasion, but it had no power to enforce its decisions. In 1937, a small clash near the Marco Polo Bridge outside Beijing escalated into a full-blown war. Japanese forces swept across northern and eastern China, capturing major cities like Shanghai and the capital, Nanjing. One of the most horrific events occurred in 1937 in the city of Nanjing. Over several weeks, hundreds of thousands of Chinese civilians and unarmed soldiers were killed. The Chinese people fought back bravely. Despite their internal divisions, they united to resist the Japanese invaders. As the war in China dragged on, Japan found itself in a difficult position. The Japanese leaders looked south, towards the European colonies in Southeast Asia. These lands were rich in oil, rubber, and tin, everything Japan needed. The first major target in this southern expansion was French Indochina. But in 1940, France was defeated by Nazi Germany in Europe. The French government was weak and in no position to defend its distant colony. In September 1940, Japanese forces moved into the northern part of French Indochina. By occupying northern Indochina, they were able to cut off a key supply route that the Allies were using to send aid to the Chinese nationalists. It also gave Japan a perfect staging ground for further expansion into Southeast Asia. In July 1941, President Franklin D. Roosevelt took a drastic step. He froze all Japanese assets in the United States and imposed a complete oil embargo on Japan. Japan relied on the United States for over 80% of its oil. Without it, its Navy and Air Force would be grounded within months. Faced with the crippling oil embargo, Japan's leaders made a fateful decision. They chose war. On December 7, 1941, they launched a surprise attack on the United States naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. Their goal was to destroy the American Pacific Fleet, giving them time to conquer Southeast Asia without interference. At almost the same time as the attack on Pearl Harbor, Japanese forces began their invasion of Southeast Asia. One of their first targets was Thailand. Faced with a powerful invading army, the government chose to sign a treaty of alliance with Japan. At the same time, another Japanese force landed on the northeast coast of the Malayan Peninsula. Malaya was a British colony, rich in tin and rubber. The British forces believed they were well prepared. They thought the dense jungles would be impossible for an army to cross. They were completely wrong. The Japanese had trained for this kind of warfare. They advanced rapidly down the peninsula, often using bicycles to move quickly along roads and jungle paths. The defenders were poorly equipped and not trained for jungle warfare. They were constantly surprised and forced into a chaotic retreat. In just 55 days, the Japanese army swept down the entire Malayan Peninsula, a distance of over 700 miles. It was a stunning military achievement that brought the Japanese right to the doorstep of Singapore. Singapore was considered the ultimate symbol of British power in Asia. It was a massive naval base often called the Gibraltar of the East. Huge, powerful guns were built along the coast, pointing out towards the ocean, ready to destroy any approaching enemy fleet. The strategy was based on the idea that any attack would come from the sea. But the planners had never seriously considered the possibility of a land-based attack from the north. After their lightning-fast campaign through Malaya, Japanese forces under General Tomoyuki Yamashita stood ready to attack Singapore. The battle for Singapore began in early February 1942. The Japanese forces quickly established a foothold and began to push inland. They targeted the island's water reservoirs, a critical resource for the city's large population. On February 15, 1942, just 1 week after the invasion began, General Percival surrendered. Over 80,000 Allied soldiers became prisoners of war. It was the largest surrender in British military history. Just hours after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Japanese forces also began their assault on the Philippines. American and Filipino forces under General Douglas MacArthur fought back hard. They retreated to the Bataan Peninsula, where they held out for several months. In April 1942, the American and Filipino forces on Bataan were forced to surrender. About 75,000 captured soldiers were forced to march over 60 miles to a prison camp. Thousands died from exhaustion, starvation, disease, or were killed along the way. While the fighting was still going on in the Philippines, Japan launched its invasion of the Dutch East Indies. The islands were incredibly rich in oil. Allied naval forces tried to stop the Japanese, but they were defeated in the Battle of the Java Sea. By March 1942, Japan had conquered the entire archipelago. It now controlled some of the world's most valuable oil fields and rubber plantations. The Japanese occupation was harsh for the Indonesian people. They exploited the country's resources and forced millions into labor. After conquering Malaya and Singapore, Japan's next step was Burma. It was the location of the Burma Road, the last remaining land route for Allies to send supplies to Chinese forces. The Japanese army, experienced in jungle warfare, advanced rapidly. By May 1942, Japan had conquered most of Burma. The climax came in 1944. The Japanese launched Operation Yugo to invade India. The resulting battles of Imphal and Kohima were some of the fiercest of the entire war. This was a catastrophic defeat for Japan. Their army suffered huge losses and was forced into a retreat from which it would never recover. By 1944, the tide had turned decisively against Japan. The United States had rebuilt its navy and was now on the offensive. Using island hopping strategy, American forces captured key islands like Guadalcanal, Saipan, and Iwo Jima in incredibly bloody battles. By 1945, Japan was isolated. Its navy and air force were almost completely destroyed, and its people faced starvation and constant bombing. In August 1945, American bombers dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The devastation was unlike anything the world had ever seen. On August 15, 1945, Emperor Hirohito announced the nation's surrender. This marked the end of World War II and the Japanese Empire. The countries it had invaded were liberated, though many faced years of instability. The quest for empire had ended in total disaster for Japan, changing the map of Asia forever.